Doug DeMuro, and today we're going to discuss my past, my history, my parents, the horror. Now, a lot of people say I'm successful because I had rich parents. In fact, people say this about basically every successful YouTuber. Sometimes it's true. In my case, it's not. And today I'm going to explain to you my origin story. Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars. So far, Cars and Bids has sold almost $500 million worth of cars, all sorts of special, interesting stuff like this, and this, and this, and this. So, if you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car, do it at carsandbids.com. Okay, so rich parents. Rich parents is the primary thing that people say about car YouTubers in general, actually, and frankly, a lot of not just generally successful people. They're successful, sure, but they only got there because they had rich parents. They started on third base. They started with this much money or this much whatever support. You hear this a lot to describe successful people. And often it's said without a real knowledge of the fact that it's true, but people say it all the time. Rich parents, you hear it a lot. And sometimes it's true and sometimes it's not. But one of the things I've learned is that people do say it basically regardless of whether or not it's true. And it's usually to make themselves feel better about why XYZ person has succeeded at that, but I'm just doing this. And they had a leg up, they had a head start. They had rich parents. Rich parents is the primary go-to because it sort of implies there was nothing I could do to control this. There was nothing I could do to get to their level of success. This started even before I was born, even before they were born. They had all these advantages. So yeah, their success brings them here, and I would be there too if I had rich parents, right? Like it's the ultimate, like they didn't even deserve it because they didn't earn it. They didn't start at a level that I did. The playing field wasn't level. You just kind of label it rich parents. They had this advantage before they were even born. I would be there if it wasn't for the rich parents. They label it rich parents, and then they had a leg up from day one, and then you feel better. You feel better. You say, you know what? They had rich parents. I'm good. And I get that. But I think inaccurately criticizing someone for the rich parents is kind of the wrong way to go about feeling better about someone else's lopsided success. I actually have a criticism that I'm going to give you that you should use to criticize me and other successful people in the future. But first, let me explain what prompted me to do this video, and I'll kind of give you my origin story. So, why am I doing this video? A few weeks ago, I posted a video about my worst car horror stories, the worst things that have happened to me in my cars. And I talked about the experience of buying a Ferrari 360 for my YouTube channel when I was 25 years old. And people were saying, oh, he couldn't have bought a car like that without rich parents. There it came out. A ton of the comments, hey, rich parents. Interestingly, I actually have been hearing this a lot more now that I've gotten more successful and have more money, which I find hilarious. Back when I started making YouTube videos, I never got the rich parents criticism, primarily because it was tremendously clear to anybody watching the videos based on my style of dress and the quality of the videos that there were no hidden riches here. There was no like generational wealth propelling me to my stardom at that time. And so no one said that ever. That was never, ever, ever on the table. But now that I have some nice stuff, like the Countach, I'll have rich parents. Well, why weren't my rich parents hanging out with me back then when I was wearing stupid clothes and using a 20-year-old camcorder? Why are they only showed up now when I've gotten successful? It would have been so nice if my rich parents had been around then. Where were they when I was starting out filming videos with jeans 3 sizes too big? Come on, rich parents, show yourself. Anyway, I wanted to set the record straight and give you a better idea how to criticize me and others, so let's start with setting the record straight. So I graduated from college 2010, and I didn't have any money at all. None. I had saved up maybe a few $1,000s from birthday and Christmas money over my lifetime, right? And that was it, like 3-4 grand maybe in my bank account. And I started working, graduating from college, I started working right out of college for Porsche, which was the corporate headquarters of Porsche, which was located in Atlanta. Now, a lot of people have even said to me, hey, your parents had the connections to get you into Porsche. No, that's not how it worked. My parents have never been in the auto industry. My parents know nothing about cars. Less than nothing about cars, as it were. And they did not have, there were no connections. I was in Atlanta, graduating from Emory University in Atlanta, which is a good school, and Porsche was looking for entry-level employees. It was 2010. We were starting to come back from the recession. They wanted to start hiring a few new roles. And, they recruited from Georgia Tech and Emory, which were the schools in Atlanta. And people were like, you got that job making all that money. Well, no, it was a base-level entry job sitting in a low cubicle on a floor full of cubicles, and I was making $48,000 a year.
Looking for health insurance? Pivot Health provides flexible, budget.
So we kept the cameras rolling, and you'll see.
I found my true love. iPhone 12 with 5G.
And I was making $48,000 a year. There was no like people turned levers for you so that you could get a leg up in the auto industry, or this is how you got all your money. That's definitely not how I got money, okay? And trust me, there was no familial connections to this job. It was just, there were a lot of other people hired. The guy who was hired the same week as me, also from just sort of sending in resumes, hoping as a college student to get hired by Porsche, he still works there. And he was also just sort of not randomly hired, we were both very qualified, but he still works at Porsche, still doing his thing. His name's Zavi, he's killing it. And so that was just, and to be clear, this wasn't like a prestigious role. I was making 48 grand a year as the lowest tier of Porsche employee. It was a cool job. I was able to get a company car, and like work around Porsche and around like the executives at Porsche who were making big decisions, at least for the US market. And that was pretty cool. But it wasn't like I was going some crazy thing and I had some crazy connections. This was a pretty, relatively easy thing to do. And it wasn't like a relatively amazing career path. But the key to this era of my life and how I started to earn money more quickly than some of my peers is that while I was working for Porsche, I took a second job as a freelance automotive writer. And within a couple of years, I was earning $75,000 a year or more from that job. Plus, I had the money from the Porsche job. Now, this may sound insane, first off, to make 75 grand a year as a part-time job freelance writer, but if you've ever employed freelance writers or worked in any sort of editing role, you know that all freelance writers suck. Without exception, they all are terrible. And if you're a good one who can turn in clean copy on time, you will get a lot of jobs. You will get as many jobs as you can from your main outlets, and then they will recommend you for other jobs. And the moment you show yourself as someone who turns in clean copy on time, you'll start getting more jobs. And the secret of the automotive journalist industry is that if you're just good, you can actually do pretty well. And I say that knowing a lot of people just aren't good. I can't make it in this industry. Well, did you turn in stuff on time? No. Do you make a lot of typos? Yeah. Well, there's something to that, isn't it? But I was, and still am when it comes to grammar and writing, and obsessive about just getting everything perfect and everything on time with deadlines. So I want to explain how this would work. This was a grind. And this is also something that I consider tremendously important for my origin story. I grinded in those first years out of college. 2010, graduated from college, and what I would do is I would work a full day at Porsche, 9 to 6, and then I would come home and start writing articles that I had been assigned throughout the day or that were due at the end of the week or whatever. And there were times when I would come home late at 6 o'clock, in winter it's dark, and just start banging out article after article and write 4, 5, 6 articles a day. News articles or lease deals or this or that, right? For all sorts of publications, but primarily for AutoTrader, I should point out. I was primarily writing freelance for AutoTrader, which was then called autotrader.com. They had launched like a content division, and even to this day, if you Google my name on AutoTrader, hundreds of articles come up, thousands of articles come up if you really go through it. Articles mainly that I've written years ago. They've kind of freshened them and put newer dates on them, but generally speaking, these were articles that I wrote 2010 to 2015 era. And I would do hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these articles. And so I was working full days at Porsche, and I remember, it was such a grind. It's truly hard to explain how much of a grind it was, but I remember there were nights where I would fall asleep at the computer at 1 a.m. writing my articles for my second job before again going to sleep and then waking up and going to Porsche the next day for my real job, as it were. Which was funny because I was actually earning more money in the second job than I was in my main job. But the two combined got me a good living, especially at that time. Now, one interesting thing about this period, and one reason this hasn't come up a lot in previous videos, is because I haven't talked about my previous life much, especially when I was just starting out, because I actually had to keep my freelance writing job secret from my career at Porsche. Because the employment contract, when you work a full-time job at a company like Porsche, they don't let you have like a second full-time job, which I did. Plus, I was writing about cars and also working for a car company. Now, at the time, Auto Trader didn't care because we were writing about Hondas and should you lease a CX-5 or that kind of, it wasn't, I never wrote about Porsche. Like Auto Trader was focused on the meat and potatoes of the car industry, Toyota, Honda, Fords, cars that cost normal prices for normal consumers. But it would have been weird, I used a pseudonym to kind of disguise it, to make sure that the, Porsche wasn't finding out and then Auto Trader was cool with it and they were kind of kept separate, but that's what I did. And I did this for years. I absolutely grinded, but I was earning six figures, which was absolutely huge in 2010, 2011, especially for a kid living in Atlanta who didn't really know how to spend money all that much except on cars. My first apartment in Atlanta, I didn't come from a rich family, so I didn't know I can buy designer clothes, right? I didn't do any of that. And so my first apartment in Atlanta was a studio apartment at Inman Park in 2010, sort of the center of the city, where I paid $550 a month for a room and a kitchen, basically. But I was earning $100 and some thousand a year writing all these articles and working for Porsche. And so as a result of this, I just saved like crazy. And so I find it so funny now when people say I have rich parents, that's how I got my Ferrari. No, I just saved my money. I was lucky that I had these two, jobs that combined paid quite well, but I just saved my money. And it's so funny that saving money, especially among young people, is considered to be so unlikely and uncommon that it's more likely that I just had rich parents who bought stuff for me than that I just made money and saved it. Like, financial literacy is so uncommon these days that the idea of saving money is actually the unusual thing. And it's more easy to attribute to external factors than just a dude who just put money in a bank account. And so the Ferrari, when I bought the Ferrari, I had quit my job at Porsche and decided, well, I'm 24, 25, I'm going to give this writing thing a try. Full time for a few years. I can always go back and do a corporate job in an office, whatever. But I was making enough money writing on the side, which then became my full-time job, that I was like, I'm going to give this a try. So I took a huge chunk of the money that I had saved in those years. It was 2010 through 2000. I bought the Ferrari in 2013. And I put it as a down payment on the Ferrari and financed the rest. Now, I've mentioned before that my parents co-signed the loan for the Ferrari. And again, financial literacy is not common, especially in YouTube comments. And so people think that means my parents gave me money. It does not. I put the money down myself for the Ferrari, but I needed a co-signer for the loan because I had no credit history. This actually explains how broke and not buy-y of things that I was. I had never financed a car. I had only ever rented this $550 a month apartment. I had never financed anything. I'd never taken out a loan ever for anything. I just didn't have a lot of money. And so I had no credit history. So a bank wasn't going to finance me for this Ferrari unless my parents co-signed the loan. They didn't put money up, they co-signed. That's the way that worked. The bank wanted to guarantor someone who actually had a credit history, and my parents had a mortgage and stuff like that, so it worked. And in fact, this was a bit of a hard conversation. People are like, oh, your parents, they co-signed the loan. That means they gave you thousands of dollars. No, they gave me no dollars, and they were pissed. They were like upset. I still remember asking them to co-sign, and they were like, oh, fine. I had just quit my real job to write about cars, and now I'm asking them to co-sign a loan to spend almost all of my money to buy a used Ferrari. And they're like, what are you fine? They did it, but like it was a fight. Let's just put it that way. And so, but it worked out. And to this day, I often say that Ferrari, it was a red 360, was the greatest investment I ever made. I spent $40,000 of my own money on the Ferrari, and then I financed the rest, and it paid off. We got a Countach here. We got a business with 35 employees. Things have gone well. And it started there. And the Ferrari, of course, I was writing about the Ferrari and doing videos. That led to more writing and more videos. And the rest is kind of history. I've made other videos that kind of go through it all. But that gives you sort of a basic idea of how it all worked at the very beginning. And The Ferrari was a huge risk. It was a huge risk, and it paid off. It doesn't always. Which brings me back to my next point about how you should criticize people like me. But I'll get to that in 1 second. The first thing is, I do want to say, and I think this is important to mention, about the rich parent thing. I was lucky enough to graduate from college without any student debt. My parents may not have been rich, giving me money to buy Ferraris like people think, or getting me jobs at Porsche where I was making money. None of that happened. But I was able to get through without school, college, without debt. And ironically, this actually primarily happened because of my brother. I have an older brother, and he got a full scholarship to college. And as a result of that, my parents had saved money for some of our college tuitions. But because my brother's college had been paid for by a scholarship, they were able to pool all of the money together just for me. It was an amazing thing. It was amazing for my family. It was amazing for my brother. It was amazing for me. And I'm still indebted to him for that having happened. And I want to be clear about this. If you think that that alone means that I was the recipient of rich parents, then that's fine. There are people who would probably take that point of view, and I understand that because it was a huge leg up. When I graduated from college in 2010, like I said, I did not have any money, a few $1,000s to my name total, but I wasn't in debt. And in today's world, when some kids go into so much student debt, just being at zero is actually a pretty significant leg up compared to some of the holes that some people are dug into. Again, there was no money handover to me, hundreds of thousands of dollars giving me a big leg up. But just being at zero, there is something there. And so if you want to say I had rich parents because of that, I get it. One other important parent thing is that my parents were always supportive. And I actually think to some extent it's better to have supportive parents than rich ones. I think there's a lot of parents, especially parents like in my social economic circle, where we weren't crazy rich, that would have said, you know what? You should go and get a real job. Go become a doctor. Go become an attorney where you can make more money. Have a good real job. But my parents were always supportive of the weird turns that my career took. And it didn't make a lot of sense because my parents were not the type that were artistic or would have done, a weird, let's try YouTube. Like that, they don't still kind of understand really what YouTube is, I think. But they never questioned it. And they just assumed that I knew best. And I did. But these days, the conversation is me helping my parents buy a house in their retirement. And that's really meaningful for me. My parents may not have given me a house or a down payment, none of that stuff, cars, whatever. But they gave me the that was important to me. I think it would have been a lot harder to go and do what I did if I didn't have my parents saying, yeah, give it a try. Hey, you're young, why not? There was a lot of that from them. And when you're starting off doing something like this, you have so much self-doubt and so much angst and so much worry about whether this is going to work and whether you're making the right choices, that if you also were hearing from your parents who kind of, you've always looked to for guidance, that no, that's a bad idea, you shouldn't be doing that. If they were saying that too, I'm not sure I would have succeeded. I'm not sure I would have had the success in the career that I have had. So not necessarily rich in finances, but rich in support. And I think that's really important. But anyway, the last thing of this video is, I told you that I was going to give you a different criticism that you should criticize us for. People who got unusually successful, especially on things like YouTube. Don't
Want to harness the power of your Snowflake data? Get our free ebook on Snowflake optimization.
Riley's falling asleep.
Okay, crew, let's get to work.
From the world of Inside Out.
Especially on things like YouTube. Don't say we have rich parents because, again, it's not always the truth, and it's often not the truth. Let me tell you something. Tavares ain't got rich parents, all right? A lot of these guys do not have rich parents. Ed, I know a lot of these guys personally. I know their situations. They don't. But people criticize them and say they do. But the criticism should instead be that we got lucky. you just said Doug he's there, he got lucky. That is true. That is an accurate criticism. There have been a lot of things, whenever I say I got lucky, and I'm talking to another entrepreneur, they go, no, we worked for it. Well, yeah, okay. I mean, if you want to believe that you alone did this, but there were a lot of really fortunate circumstances that worked in my favor. One was getting on YouTube in 2013. You could be the best car YouTuber in the world, and you try and now, it's hard. It's hard to break through. It's hard to break in. It is much different. When I got on in 2013, the only game in town was Motor Trend. There were very few other people there, and it just wasn't as hard to do well and make content. It simply wasn't. Getting into the algorithm early and getting in right then, 12 years ago, that was a huge deal in terms of my success. Meeting the right people, like the people that I freelanced for, who gave me so much work that I was able to quit my job and focus on trying to do this. That was luck. There was real luck there. There was a lot of hard work too. And so in that sense, I agree with those entrepreneurs who write off luck. And there was a lot of grinding, and there were a lot of late nights, and there was a lot of travel. Before I had kids, I was on planes. When I lived in Philly, I was on planes all the time to go film car videos. You can see it if you watch videos from that era. 2016, 15, 14, 17. I'm everywhere filming car videos just to be first, just to be best. But I want to be clear, a lot of people grind and don't get anywhere. A lot of people work just as hard as I did and don't have the level of success that I did. And I think it's really important to look at this and say, there was luck. And if you want to call me lucky, you're right. I totally agree with that. And I think that criticism is fair and it's honest and it's real. I took some chances, there were some risks, and I worked hard. There was some stuff that I did to make it happen. And people always say, luck is the combination of preparedness and opportunity. But there was a lot of opportunity that worked in my favor. Even not having those student loans. What if my brother hadn't gotten the scholarship? What if I have to graduate $100,000 in debt like so many people? Do I then try to write about cars for a living? No, I'd probably be sitting in a cube. I remember when I was at Emory, it's a tirade, I don't even have it written down, but I was at Emory, there was a kid in my floor, my junior year, who was the funniest person I've ever met in my entire life. His name's Jake. And he should have been a comedian. And I told him point blank, you should be a comedian. But he was from New York, and in his world, people went into finance or consulting, and he was like, I can't make a living as a comedian, and he could have. But it's just, that's not what people think about, And so I would have done that. I think if circumstances had been a little different, but there was some luck that played in my favor that pushed me in the direction I got. And it worked out. A lot of stuff worked out for me. And I'm very grateful for that. And if you want to criticize me and call me lucky, I think that's true. And I think a lot of people grind hard and don't get to the level I did. And I'm very grateful for a lot of the lucky circumstances that I have. But not rich parents. And so that's my story.